through time, humiliation in absentia. People imagine that programmers don't like to talk because they prefer machines to people. This is not completely true. Programmers don't talk because they must not be interrupted. This inability to be interrupted leads to a life that is strangely asynchronous with the one lived by other human beings. It's better to send email than to call a programmer on the phone. It's better to leave a note on the chair than to expect a programmer to come to a meeting. This is because the programmer must work in mind time, but the phone rings in real time. Similarly, meetings are supposed to take place in real time. It's not just ego that prevents programmers from working in groups. It's the synchrony problem. To synchronize with other people, or their representation in telephones, buzzers, and doorbells, can only mean interrupting the thought train. Interruptions mean certain bugs. You must not get off the train. I used to have dreams in which I was overhearing conversations I had to program. Once I had to program 2 people making love. In my dream, they sweated and tumbled while I sat with a cramped hand writing code. The couple went from gentle caresses to ever-widening passions, and I despaired as I tried desperately to find a way to express the act of love in the computer language called C. 2. I once had a job where I didn't talk to anyone for 2 years. Here was the arrangement. I was the first engineer hired by a startup software company. In exchange for large quantities of stock that might be worth something someday, I was supposed to give up my life. I sat in a large room with 2 recently hired engineers and 3 Sun workstations. The fans of the machines whirred, the keys of the keyboards clicked. Occasionally, one or another of us would grunt or mutter. Otherwise, we did not speak. Now and then, I would have a temper outburst in which I pounded the keyboard with my fists, setting off a barrage of beeps. My colleagues might look up, but never said anything about this. Once a week, I had a 5-minute meeting with my boss. I liked him. He was genial. He did not pass on his own anxieties about working in a startup. At this meeting, I would routinely tell him I was on schedule. Since being on schedule is a very rare thing in software engineering, he would say, "Good, see you next week." I remember watching my boss disappear down the row of cubbyhole partitions. He always wore clothes that looked exactly the same, khaki pants and a check shirt of the same pattern. So, week to week, the image of his disappearing down the row of partitions remained unchanged. The same khaki pants, the same pattern on the check shirt. Good, see you next week. Real time was no longer compelling. Days, weeks, months, and years came and went without much physical change in my surroundings. Surely I was aging. My hair must have grown. I must have cut it. It must have grown again. Gravity must have been working on my sedentary body, but I didn't notice. I only paid attention to my back and shoulders because they seized up on me from long sitting. Later, after I left the company, there was a masseuse on staff. That way, even the back and shoulders could be soothed, all the better to keep you in your seat. What was compelling was the software. I was making something out of nothing, I thought, and I admit the software had more life for me than my brief love affair, my friends, my cat, my house, my neighbor who was stabbed and nearly killed by her husband. I was creating, that is the word we used, a device-independent interface library. One day, I sat in a room by myself surrounded by computer monitors from various manufacturers. I remember looking at the screens of my companions and saying, "Speak to me." I completed the interface library in 2 years and left the company. On my last day on the job, the financial officer gave me a check. It was a payment to buy back most of my stock. I knew this was coming. When I was hired, I'd signed an agreement. The price of leaving before 5 years was the return of the stock. Still, I didn't feel free or virtuous. I put the check in my pocket, then got drunk at my farewell party. 5 years later, the company went public. For the engineers who'd stayed, the original arrangement was made good. In exchange for giving up 7 years of their lives, they became very, very wealthy.